Welcome to NibblePop Stories. Today, we are going to hear the story of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. It is sometime in the 18th century. Robert Walton is a well-to-do Englishman with a passion for seafaring. He is the captain of a ship headed on a dangerous voyage to the North Pole. He has two aims in his Arctic voyage: to find a route to the lands beyond the North Pole and to discover the source of the magnetism of the pole. On 11 December, Walton writes to his sister, Margaret Saville, from St. Petersburg to share his excitement and plans. He reflects on his lifelong passion for exploration, which began with reading adventure stories from their uncle's library. Though he initially dreamed of a literary career, personal setbacks redirected him towards seafaring. Walton prepared for this journey by joining whale fishing expeditions and enduring harsh conditions, refining both his physical and intellectual skills for the challenges ahead. In spite of his enthusiasm, Walton admits moments of self-doubt and acknowledges the dangers that lie ahead. He plans to depart for Archangel soon, where he will hire a ship and crew, aiming to set sail in June. In his letter, he bids a heartfelt farewell to Margaret, expressing his hopes for her well-being and praying for a safe return from his ambitious journey. On March 28th, Walton writes a second letter to his sister from Archangel. He describes how slowly time passes in the freezing cold as he gets ready for his Arctic expedition. He has found a ship and started hiring sailors, choosing those who seem brave and trustworthy. Yet, despite these preparations, Walton admits he feels very lonely and wishes he had a friend to share his excitement and support him in moments of doubt. He speaks fondly of two important crew members: an eager lieutenant with big dreams and a kind, caring captain. Walton also shares how his love for the sea's dangers and mysteries comes from reading Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. As he thinks about the risks ahead, he hints that he might not return and asks his sister to remember him if something goes wrong. In his third letter, dated July 7th, Walton tells his sister, Mrs. Saville, that he is safe and making good progress on his Arctic journey. The letter is sent with a merchant ship going back to England, though Walton says he might not return for many years. His crew stays strong and loyal, showing no fear even with large blocks of ice floating around them. Walton says the weather has been better than expected, with warm southern winds helping them move forward. He promises to be careful and feels confident that he will succeed. In his fourth letter, dated August 5th, Walton describes a strange event. On July 31st, his ship got stuck in ice and covered by thick fog. When the fog cleared, Walton and his crew saw a sledge pulled by dogs carrying a giant figure. The figure moved quickly across the ice and disappeared into the distance. Later that night, another sledge floated toward their ship. It carried a weak, nearly frozen man with only one dog still alive. The crew brought him aboard, and Walton took care of him until he started to recover. The man spoke English with a foreign accent. He said he was chasing someone who had escaped from him, likely the same figure the crew had seen earlier. Over time, Walton and the stranger become friends. The stranger warns Walton about the dangers of ambition, hinting that his own suffering came from his search for knowledge. Grateful for Walton's kindness, the stranger agrees to tell his story. Walton ends the letter by saying the man will begin his tale the next day. The stranger's name is Victor Frankenstein. He was born in Naples and grew up in Geneva, Switzerland. Victor's father, Alphonse, was a respected politician and close friend of a wealthy merchant named Beaufort. When Beaufort unexpectedly lost all his money, he fled to Lucerne with his daughter Caroline. After 10 months, Beaufort died. Alphonse took Caroline back to Geneva and 2 years later married her. After their wedding, they travelled to Italy, where Victor was born. Victor's childhood is a blissful time. His parents are kind and loving. When Victor was 5, while visiting a poor Italian family, Caroline notices a beautiful blonde girl among the dark-haired Italian children. Her name is Elizabeth Lavenza. Elizabeth is the orphaned daughter of a Milanese nobleman and a German woman. When Caroline learns that the Italian family can barely afford to feed her, she adopts Elizabeth and brings her back to Geneva. She decides that Elizabeth and Victor should someday marry. Victor and Elizabeth grow up very close. Their different personalities make their bond even stronger. Elizabeth is calm and enjoys poetry and nature, while Victor is curious and wants to understand how the world works. The family grows with 2 more sons, and they settle in Geneva, Switzerland, spending most of their time at their estate in Bellerive. At school, Victor becomes best friends with Henry Clerval, an ambitious boy who loves stories of adventure and heroism. At 13, Victor discovers the works of the alchemist Cornelius Agrippa. He becomes fascinated and reads more from Paracelsus and Albertus Magnus, dreaming of ending disease and defeating death. But when he is 15, a thunderstorm changes his views. He watches lightning destroy a large oak tree, and a guest explains the science of electricity. This new knowledge makes Victor lose interest in alchemy, and he begins studying math and modern science instead. At 17, Victor's parents decide he should attend the University of Ingolstadt in Germany. But before he leaves, tragedy strikes. Elizabeth becomes very sick with scarlet fever. Caroline takes care of her and saves her, but catches the illness herself. Sadly, Caroline's condition worsens and she dies. Before passing, she tells Victor and Elizabeth that she hopes they will marry one day. Victor is heartbroken. He delays his trip for a few weeks, but eventually leaves for Ingolstadt. There, he meets Professor Krempe, who dismisses his interest in old alchemy and urges him to focus on modern science. Later, Victor attends a lecture by Professor Waldman. Waldman's kindness and passion inspire Victor. He shows Victor his lab, gives him advice, and recommends books to read. Victor is motivated by Waldman's support. He throws himself into studying science. He gets completely obsessed with studying natural philosophy, especially chemistry. He works very hard, reads many books, and within 2 years, he earns praise at the university for his progress. He becomes fascinated by the mystery of life and starts wondering how life begins. This leads him to study anatomy and decay. He spends hours in graveyards and dissecting rooms, trying to learn how to bring life to dead matter. Eventually, he makes a major discovery: how to give life to lifeless objects. Victor is excited. He decides to create a living being, a huge creature, about 8 feet tall. He dreams of becoming the creator of a new species that will feel grateful to him. Victor spends months gathering materials and working non-stop in a secret lab. The project takes over his life, and he forgets about his friends, family, and even nature. His health starts to fail, but he ignores it. He thinks he will rest once the creature is finished. He becomes more anxious and feels very alone, but he tells himself the result will make everything worth it. As he gets closer to completing his work, Victor feels both excited and scared. What began as a thrilling goal now seems like a heavy burden. Still, he pushes forward, believing his creation will make all his sacrifices worthwhile. On a cold November night, Victor finally finishes his creation. Around 1 a.m., by the dim candlelight, the creature opens its yellow eyes, takes a breath, and moves. But instead of feeling joy, Victor is horrified. He had hoped the creature would be beautiful, but it looks monstrous, with yellow skin, watery eyes, and black lips. Victor is overwhelmed by fear and regret. He runs from the room. He tries to rest, but his sleep is filled with nightmares. In his dream, Elizabeth turns into the lifeless body of his dead mother. When Victor wakes, the creature is standing by his bed, making strange sounds and staring at him. Victor is terrified. He escapes and spends the night pacing in the courtyard, afraid the monster will follow him. The next morning, Victor wanders the streets, lost in fear and confusion. Suddenly, he sees his friend, Henry Clerval, arriving in a carriage. Seeing Clerval gives Victor a moment of joy. They return to Victor's room, though Victor is nervous that the creature might still be there. To his relief, the monster is gone. At first, Victor feels happy, but he quickly falls into a state of panic and exhaustion. He becomes very sick. For months, Clerval cares for him with kindness and patience. Slowly, as spring arrives, Victor starts to recover and his mood improves. Once he feels stronger, Clerval gives him a letter from Elizabeth that arrived during his illness. Elizabeth writes to Victor, worried about his illness. She wishes she could have cared for him, but couldn't leave home. She shares news from Geneva. Ernest is growing strong and wants to join the military, though their father disagrees. Elizabeth also says that Justin, their old servant, has returned after her mother's death. She speaks lovingly of Victor's little brother William, describing him as playful and cheerful. Elizabeth begs Victor to write soon to ease their worries. Victor writes back right away. He wants to move on from his past. He gives up his old studies and joins Clerval in learning new subjects like Persian and Arabic. Studying with Clerval gives Victor peace and helps him forget his troubles. As winter passes, they explore the countryside around Ingolstadt, enjoying nature and each other's company. For the first time in a long while, Victor feels happy and free from his fears. When Victor returns from his trip, he gets a letter from his father with terrible news. His youngest brother, William, has been murdered. William went missing during a walk, and they found his body the next morning. Elizabeth feels guilty because William was wearing her locket with their mother's picture, and she thinks this attracted the killer. Victor is shocked and upset. He and Clerval hurry back to Geneva. Near the spot where William was killed, Victor sees a shadowy figure. A flash of lightning reveals it's the monster he created. Victor realizes the creature killed William, and he feels responsible for his brother's death. When Victor gets home, his brother Ernest tells him that their servant Justin has been accused of the crime. The locket was found in her pocket. While others think she is guilty, Victor knows the monster is the real murderer. Elizabeth is heartbroken, but sure that Justin is innocent. Victor believes the trial will clear her name and hopes she will be set free. Justin tells the court she was visiting her aunt in a nearby village the night William was murdered. On her way home, she met a man who said William was missing. Justin searched for him for hours but found nothing. When the city gates closed, she slept in a barn. She can't explain how the locket ended up in her pocket. No one believes her. Victor wishes he could confess to the crime himself, but he knows it would sound crazy since he wasn't there when it happened. Elizabeth defends Justin, calling her kind and loving, but the crowd still believes she is guilty. The next morning, Justin confesses to the crime. Elizabeth is upset, but Justin admits she lied to get forgiveness from the priest, who threatened her with eternal damnation until she gave in. Now Justin regrets confessing. Elizabeth promises to fight for her, but Justin has already accepted her fate. The next day, Justin is executed. Victor knows the creature he created caused both William and Justin's deaths. Elizabeth and the family are crushed by grief, and Victor blames himself for everything. Deep inside, he fears even worse tragedies are yet to come. After Justin's death, Victor sinks into despair. His father tries to comfort him, but Victor's terrible secret makes it impossible for him to find peace. When the family moves to their house in Belrive, Victor spends his nights alone on Lake Geneva. He thinks about ending his life, but the thought of Elizabeth and his family stops him. His only hope is to destroy the creature and avenge William and Justin. Elizabeth also feels deep sadness, seeing the world as unfair and cruel. One day in August, Victor decides to travel to the valley of Chamonix, hoping that the beauty of nature will ease his suffering. As he journeys through the Alps, he admires waterfalls and the towering Mont Blanc. Sometimes these sights bring back happy memories, but the relief never lasts. While crossing the glacier, Victor suddenly sees the creature coming toward him at a great speed. At first, Victor feels scared, but his fear quickly turns into anger. He calls the creature a devil and swears to destroy him. The creature tells Victor that he deserves kindness and understanding. He explains that he was once good but became evil because he was lonely and rejected. The creature begs Victor to listen to his story. He promises to live in peace if he listens to him. Feeling curious, Victor agrees to follow the creature to a hut. There, the creature begins to tell his story. The creature talks about his first experiences after coming to life. At first, everything felt confusing. He could see, hear, smell, and feel all at once. Over time, he learned to tell his senses apart. Bright light hurt his eyes, so he looked for shade and found rest in a forest near Ingolstadt. He ate berries and drank from a stream. At night, the cold scared him, and he felt lonely and lost. The moon gave him some comfort, but he still didn't understand the world around him. As time passed, he learned to recognize birds, trees, and sounds. One day, he found a fire left by travelers. It gave him warmth, but when he touched the flames, he burnt his hand. He realized fire could help, but also hurt. When food became hard to find, the creature left the forest to look for a better place. He found a small hut and entered it, scaring an old man inside. The man ran away, leaving the creature alone. He felt grateful for the shelter and ate the leftover food and rested. Soon after, the creature found a small shed connected to a cottage. Through a crack in the wall, he watched the family inside. They worked together, shared food, and treated each other with care. Seeing their kindness and love made the creature feel emotions he had never known. The creature decided to stay in the shed and watch the family quietly. Their peaceful life gave him some comfort, but he still felt lonely and different. He admired their love, but knew they would fear him, just like the old man had. Over time, the creature learns that the family is poor and shares the little food they have. He is touched by their kindness. He stops stealing from them and instead helps by secretly gathering firewood at night. He is determined to learn their language by listening to them speak. Watching them makes him happy, but he also feels lonely and ashamed when he sees his reflection in water, realizing how different and ugly he looks. The creature hopes that learning to speak will help him earn the family's trust, even with his appearance. As spring arrives, the world becomes beautiful and the family seems happier. This gives the creature hope. He works even harder to improve his language. He believes that one day they might accept him and he can find happiness with them. One day, a woman named Safi arrives at the cottage. Felix, the young man, is thrilled to see her, and her presence brings joy to the whole family. Safi speaks a different language, so she starts learning the family's words. The creature watches closely and decides to learn along with her. As time passes, the creature improves his language skills. He also learns to read, while Felix teaches Safi from a book about the history of human civilizations. The stories of greatness, war, and suffering fascinate him, but they also confuse him. He wonders how people can be both kind and cruel at the same time. The more the creature learns about society, the more he realizes how different and alone he is. He sees that people value things like family, wealth, and good looks, things he doesn't have. When he sees his reflection, he feels horrified by how ugly and unnatural he looks. This makes him feel even more lonely, knowing he will never fit in. In spite of his sadness, the creature dreams of being accepted by the family. As he learns more about human relationships, he feels even worse. He realizes he has no parents, no siblings, and no friends. This fills him with deep pain, making him wish he had never learned anything at all. The creature learns the story of the cottagers. Delacy, the old man, was once rich in Paris. His children, Agatha and Felix, were well respected. Their lives changed when Safi's father, a Turkish merchant, was falsely accused of a crime and sentenced to death. Felix, shocked by the unfair trial, promised to help him escape. In prison, Felix met Safie, the merchant's daughter, and they fell in love. The merchant promised that Felix could marry Safie if he helped him escape. Safie's mother was a Christian slave who married the merchant. She raised Safie to be independent and free. Safie didn't want to return to Turkey, where she wouldn't have the same freedom as in Europe. She hoped to stay with Felix instead. Felix helped Safie's father escape, and they crossed the border together. But the merchant secretly didn't want Safie to marry a Christian. He planned to leave with her and break his promise. Then, the French government discovered the escape and arrested Felix's father and sister. Felix went back to Paris, hoping to save them, but the family was jailed for 5 months and later exiled from France. Meanwhile, the merchant fled to Constantinople, leaving Safie with a servant. When Safie heard that Felix had been exiled, she ran away. She found her way to Felix in Germany and was reunited with him. The creature feels deeply moved by the kindness and struggles of the cottagers. He admires their love and goodness, even in hard times. One night, the creature finds a bag with clothes and books. Among the books, Paradise Lost affects him the most. He feels like Satan because, unlike Adam, he has no creator to care for him. Seeing the cottagers' happiness makes him feel jealous, just like Satan. He also finds Victor Frankenstein's journal and learns how Victor abandoned him. This discovery fills the creature with sadness and anger. The creature decides to reveal himself to the cottagers. He plans to speak with the blind old man, de Lacy, first, hoping the man will see beyond his appearance. One day, when the others are away, the creature knocks on the door and talks with de Lacy. The old man is kind and listens to him. But when Felix, Agatha, and Safie return, they are terrified. Agatha faints, Safie runs away, and Felix strikes the creature with a stick. The creature is heartbroken, but he does not fight back. Instead, he returns to his hiding place, filled with pain and sadness. He vows revenge on humanity, especially on Victor Frankenstein, his creator, for bringing him into such misery. He is determined to confront Victor, and he sets out for Geneva. Along the way, he suffers freezing cold, hunger, and overwhelming loneliness. At one point, he rescues a girl from drowning, but instead of gratitude, a man shoots him. This betrayal deepens the creature's hatred for humans and fuels his thirst for revenge. Upon reaching Geneva, the creature comes across a little boy and hopes the child will not judge him by his appearance. However, the boy screams in fear and reveals that his father is Frankenstein. Realizing the child is related to Victor, the creature strangles William in a fit of rage. The creature takes a necklace from William's body and later finds a barn where he discovers a young woman sleeping on the straw. He hides the necklace in her clothes, framing her for the boy's murder. For several days he stays near the scene of the crime before retreating into the mountains. Now sitting with Victor in his hut, the creature makes his demand. He wants Victor to create a female companion, someone as deformed and lonely as himself, who will not reject him and with whom he can share his life. At first, Victor is furious and refuses. He fears that another creature would cause even more harm. However, the creature insists that his misery has made him cruel and promises to leave humanity forever if Victor fulfills his request. Victor struggles with the decision, torn between pity for the creature and fear of the consequences. After much thought, he agrees. He realizes it may be the only way to protect his loved ones. By morning, Victor returns to Geneva, determined to begin the dreadful task of creating the new creature. Victor decides to travel to England to learn about new scientific discoveries that might help him. His father notices his sadness and suggests that marriage to Elizabeth could bring him happiness. Though Victor loves Elizabeth, he does not want to marry her before fulfilling his promise. Clerval joins him on his journey to England. Victor and Clerval spend a few months in London. Victor focuses on gathering the scientific knowledge he needs to fulfill his promise, while Clerval enjoys meeting intelligent people and trying new things. After receiving an invitation from a friend in Scotland, they decide to continue their journey. Clerval loves the beauty of nature and explores local history, but Victor remains worried and sad. He fears what the creature might do and becomes more anxious with every delay. When they reach Scotland, Victor asks Clerval to explore on his own. Victor then travels to the remote Orkney Islands, where he finds a rundown hut. There, far from everyone, he begins the dreadful task of creating the new creature. Victor worries that the female creature could be even more dangerous than the first or reject her mate, causing more trouble. He fears that if they stay together, they might create a race of monsters. Scared of what could happen, he destroys the unfinished creature. The creature is furious that Victor broke his promise, but Victor firmly says he will never make another creature, no matter what happens. The creature is angry. He swears revenge and warns Victor that he will be there on his wedding night. Meanwhile, Clerval asks Victor to meet him in Perth and travel with him to London before Clerval leaves for India. Victor decides to leave in 2 days. That night, he rows out to sea and throws the remains of the female creature into the water, using a basket filled with stones to sink them. He feels relaxed by the breeze and waves and lies down in the boat and falls asleep. When he wakes up, the wind has pushed him far out to sea. After drifting for hours, he finally sees land and steers toward a harbor. When Victor reaches the shore, he finds out he is in Ireland. People tell him he must go to the local magistrate, Mr. Curwen, because he is a suspect in murder. They explain a man was found dead the night before. Although tired and surprised, Victor agrees to go. He feels certain he can prove he is innocent. Victor meets with the magistrate, Mr. Curwen, and listens as witnesses testify about a recent murder. A fisherman reports finding the still warm body of a young man on the beach late the previous night, showing signs of strangulation. Another witness claims to have seen a man in the same boat Victor had used near the crime scene, while a third witness confirms seeing someone sailing away from the area just before the body was discovered. When Victor is brought to view the corpse, he is horrified to recognize it as Clerval. He is overwhelmed with grief. He collapses and falls into violent convulsions. Victor is imprisoned, where he suffers from fever and delirium. For 2 months, he hallucinates that the creature is strangling him. Mr. Curwen ensures he receives proper care from a nurse and physician, and Victor's strength begins to improve when his father arrives. After 3 months, Victor undergoes a private trial and is found innocent, as evidence confirms he was on the Orkneys at the time of Clerval's death. Though still tormented by grief and illness, Victor urges his father to arrange their immediate return to Geneva. He is determined to protect his loved ones. Victor believes it is his destiny to face the monster one last time. Victor and his father arrive in Paris. Victor receives a letter from Elizabeth expressing her love and concern. She asks him whether he loves anyone else. The letter reminds Victor of the creature's threat to kill him on his wedding night. Yet he wants to bring some happiness to his father and Elizabeth. He also fears that the creature might harm others if he delays the wedding. Victor resolves to marry Elizabeth as soon as he returns to Switzerland. He writes back, assuring her of his love and promising to reveal his dark secret the day after their wedding. Victor and Elizabeth reunite in Geneva. As their wedding day approaches, Victor feels moments of calm but remains anxious about the monster's threat. He conceals his fears from Elizabeth and prepares himself for a potential confrontation, carrying weapons for protection. On the day of their wedding, the couple sets off by boat to spend their first night at Evian. Victor and Elizabeth spend the evening walking by the lake and enjoying the view from the inn. As night falls and a storm rolls in, Victor's anxiety grows. Wishing to spare Elizabeth from the horrors he expects, he asks her to wait in a separate room while he keeps watch. Just as Victor begins to believe the creature won't appear, a piercing scream shatters the night. Victor rushes into the room. He finds Elizabeth lifeless on the bed, strangled. As he grieves over her, Victor spots the creature at the window, grinning and pointing mockingly at Elizabeth's corpse. In a fit of rage, Victor fires his pistol, but the creature swiftly escapes into the lake. Victor and the inn's staff spend hours searching the lake and surrounding area, but they fail to find the monster. Exhausted, Victor collapses and is carried to bed. Later, he returns to Elizabeth's body, tormented by the loss of everyone he has loved and fearful that his father and brother may be the creature's next victims. Determined to protect them, Victor returns to Geneva without delay. Upon arriving in Geneva, Victor finds his family still alive, but the news of Elizabeth's death devastates his father, Alphonse, who dies a few days later. Overwhelmed by grief, Victor suffers a breakdown and is confined to a solitary cell in an asylum. Slowly, he regains his strength and emerges with a singular purpose: to exact revenge on the creature. A month after his release, Victor tells his story to a local magistrate. Though the magistrate listens with sympathy, he warns that capturing the monster will likely be impossible. Frustrated by the magistrate's doubts, Victor storms out. He is determined to hunt down the creature himself and end the nightmare once and for all. Victor leaves Geneva, giving up everything familiar. He follows the creature across deserts, villages, and wild lands. He faces hunger, cold, and despair, but refuses to quit. He tracks the creature along the Rhone River, across the Black Sea, and into the Russian wilderness. Finally, he learns that the creature has stolen a sledge and has crossed the Arctic ice. Determined to catch him, Victor follows, even though the journey is dangerous. When Victor finally catches sight of the creature, the ice breaks apart, leaving him stranded. On the verge of death, Victor is rescued by Walton's ship. He initially plans to ask for a boat to continue his pursuit, but agrees to join the ship when he learns it is heading north, aligning with his mission. Victor shares his story with Walton, but doubts he will live to complete his revenge. He asks Walton to kill the creature if their paths cross. Walton believes Victor's tale and suggests starting a new life, but Victor insists that no one can replace Elizabeth or Clerval. In Walton's letters to his sister dated August 26th to September 12th, he describes his crew's growing desperation as the ship gets trapped in ice. Victor is very sick, but still gives a powerful speech. He urges the sailors to stay brave and continue their mission. However, Walton ultimately agrees to abandon the expedition. When the ice breaks, the ship turns south and the crew celebrates. Victor is still determined to complete his mission. He tries to leave his bed but faints. The ship's doctor warns Walton that Victor's death is near. Before his death, Victor says he no longer hates the creature, but believes it must be destroyed. He advises Walton to seek peace, not ambition. Victor says he finally feels at peace and sees his loved ones waiting for him. Shortly after, Victor dies, leaving Walton to mourn both his friend and the failure of his expedition. That night, the creature appears on the ship, grieving over Victor's body. He tells Walton that he suffered from guilt throughout his acts of revenge. Though he pitied Victor after killing Clerval, envy drove him to kill Elizabeth. Now, with Victor dead, the creature feels empty. He plans to travel to the far north, build a funeral pyre, and end his life in the flames. After saying goodbye to Walton, the creature jumps out of the window onto the ice and disappears into the night. That brings us to the end of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Many of you have made this request, and I hope you have enjoyed the story. If you like our series, then please subscribe and make some suggestions about which stories you want to hear from us. This is Monami Mukherjee signing off. Good night.